When I walked through the mirrored glass doors of the company my husband had spent 2 decades building, I never imagined my face would be on a poster that read, "Entry Forbidden." The security guard glanced at my wedding ring and just laughed. "Ma'am, I know Mr. Croft's wife very well. She comes in here every day, and you are definitely not her." In that single moment, I understood that the last 10 years of my marriage had been an elaborate lie. But before I continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 61 years old, and until that Thursday afternoon, I believed I knew my husband Julian better than anyone in the world. We'd been together for 38 years, married for 26, and we shared a life I considered happy, despite the long hours he poured into his tech company, Croft Innovations. It all started with an innocent impulse. Julian had mentioned a commemorative lunch at the office to celebrate closing a major contract with a multinational corporation. I thought I'd surprise him by bringing his favorite cake, the dark chocolate and walnut one I always made for our anniversaries. I imagined it would be an appreciated gesture, not just by him, but by the employees who so rarely saw me. The corporate building for Croft Innovations was imposing, all mirrored glass reflecting the blue afternoon sky. I walked across the parking lot carefully carrying the cake box, a strange sense of anxiety fluttering in my chest. I had visited the company only a handful of times in recent years. Julian always said he preferred to keep work and personal life separate, a boundary I now realize I respected far too much. Stepping into the chilled lobby, I immediately noticed something was off. A discreet sign on the reception desk displayed several photos of people with the caption, "Restricted Access." Among them, I recognized my own face, taken from a picture of us in Cancun 3 years ago. I froze, too confused to process what I was seeing. A middle-aged security guard approached, his name tag identifying him as Frank. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes, I'm here to see Julian Croft. I'm Eleanor, his wife." The man gave me a strange look, a slight frown creasing his brow. Then the unexpected happened. He laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine, disbelieving laugh. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I know Mr. Croft's wife very well. Isabella comes in here almost every day. In fact, she just left to have lunch with him." I felt the world tilt on its axis. "Isabella? Who on earth is Isabella? There must be a mistake," I insisted, holding up my hand to show him my wedding ring. "We've been married for 26 years. The guard seemed genuinely bewildered. He then pulled a tablet from the reception counter. "Look, I don't mean to be rude, but here's a photo of Mr. Croft with his wife at the last company event." He turned the screen toward me. The image showed Julian smiling, his arm wrapped around the waist of an elegant blonde woman. She was wearing a stunning red dress, and on her left ring finger was a ring identical to mine. I handed the cake box to the guard, my hands trembling uncontrollably. "When they get back, please give this to Julian. Tell him it was Eleanor who brought it." I staggered back out into the parking lot, barely able to breathe. Inside my car, I gripped the steering wheel as if it were the last solid thing in a world that had just crumbled. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to comprehend what I had just discovered. 26 years of marriage. So many nights Julian had come home late, exhausted from meetings, the frequent tech conferences that kept him away for days, the business trips that had multiplied over the last 6 years. It all clicked into place with a terrible, sickening sense. I started the engine and drove aimlessly for hours, unable to return home, a home that now felt like an elaborate stage set for a play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. My phone rang several times. Julian. I ignored the calls until a message popped up on the screen. "Eleanor, Frank from security just called me. We need to talk. Please meet me at the cafe near the house." The cafe? The Cardinal was our favorite spot, the place where Julian had proposed to me all those years ago. The thought that he chose that place for this conversation sent a wave of nausea through me. Still, I drove there, moved by a desperate need for answers. Julian was already sitting in a discreet corner when I arrived. His normally confident face looked haggard, with deep, dark circles under his eyes. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity for him, until I remembered he was the architect of this betrayal. "Who is Isabella?" I asked without sitting down. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please, sit. I can explain." "Explain what, Julian? That you have 2 wives? That my picture is on a do not enter list? That your entire staff knows about this farce?" "It's not like that," he began, rubbing his face with his hands. "Isabella is complicated." "How long?" My voice was barely a whisper. 6 years. A whole life I knew nothing about. It wasn't a question. Julian nodded slowly. "I started working with Isabella when we expanded into consulting. She was brilliant. She understood the business. One thing led to another. And you decided to marry her while you were still married to me?" The disbelief in my voice was palpable. It wasn't a legal marriage. It was more of a symbolic ceremony for her family. "So, symbolic bigamy. Is that supposed to make me feel better?" The rage was finally starting to replace the shock. "Eleanor, I never wanted to hurt you." Those words, so cliché, so empty, unleashed something inside me, a lifetime of trust, shattered, a trove of memories that now felt fake. I stood up, unable to stay a minute longer. "I'm staying at my sister's. Don't try to contact me. Talk to my lawyer." As I walked out of the cafe, I felt strangely calm. The world had collapsed, but there was a terrible clarity in finally understanding the truth. As I drove toward my sister Clara's house, I realized my life had been split into 2 distinct parts, before and after that sign at Croft Innovations. The most devastating part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing I had lived a lie for so long without ever suspecting a thing. What kind of elaborate theater had Julian staged to maintain 2 separate lives for 6 years? And who was I in this whole story? The legitimate wife, kept in ignorance, or just the first of his many lies? Night fell as I drove, the sky darkening like my thoughts. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was clear. The marriage I knew was over, and maybe it had never really existed at all. Clara opened the door with a worried expression. One look at my face was all it took for her to understand something terrible had happened. Without asking questions, she hugged me and led me inside. "It's Julian," I managed to say between sobs as I finally sat on her couch. "He has another family." The next few hours passed in a haze of strong tea, tears, and the fragmented pieces of the story I could manage to tell. Clara, ever the practical sister, listened in silence until I finished. Then she opened her laptop. "Let's find out who this woman is," she said with determination. Finding Isabella was surprisingly easy. My fake sister-in-law had an active social media presence with no apparent concern for hiding her life. Her profile displayed her full name, Isabella Rossi Croft. "She uses his last name," I murmured, feeling a new wave of pain. The photos told a story that left me nauseous. Isabella and Julian at corporate dinners. The 2 of them on trips he told me were for work. Her wearing jewelry I recognized as gifts Julian had supposedly bought for me, but which had gotten lost in delivery. The final blow came when we found pictures of a house, a beautiful waterfront home I didn't recognize. In the caption, Isabella wrote, "Our weekend getaway is finally ready. Thank you, my love, for the perfect anniversary gift." The date of the post coincided with a week Julian had claimed to be at a conference in Denver. How did he keep this hidden for so long? I asked, more to myself than to Clara. "People like Julian are experts at compartmentalizing their lives," she answered, anger clear in her voice. "Eleanor, you need to see a lawyer. Immediately." The next morning, still in a daze, I followed her advice. The office of Mr. Davies, a family law specialist, was a haven of calm in the chaos of my life. He listened to my story without judgment. "Mrs. Vance, what your husband has done may constitute bigamy, depending on the nature of his relationship with this other family." Over the next few hours, I detailed everything I knew about our finances to Mr. Davies. The embarrassing truth was I knew very little. Julian had always handled everything, depositing a generous allowance into my account while he managed the larger investments. I had trusted him completely, a naivete that now seemed childish. "We need to act quickly," Mr. Davies said. "It's possible he's already moving assets. I'll file for an injunction today." As I left the office, my phone rang again. Julian for the 10th time. This time I answered. "We need to talk about the next steps." His voice sounded strangely composed, businesslike. "I was with my lawyer. He'll be in touch with yours." A heavy silence followed. "We don't need to involve lawyers, Eleanor. We can sort this out like adults." His audacity took my breath away. "Like adults? You've been living a double life for 6 years, Julian. You have another wife." "Isabella is not legally my wife," he retorted, as if that were the main point. "And does that matter? You bought her a house while telling me we were saving for our future? You spent holidays with her while I sat at home alone believing you were working? I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I interrupted. "Forgetting an anniversary or buying the wrong gift is a mistake. What you did was build an entire life based on lies." I hung up, trembling with rage. By the time I got back to Clara's apartment, I had 3 text messages from him, all offering a generous settlement if we kept things civilized. The next day, I decided I needed to face the reality of my situation. While Clara was at work, I went back to our house, my house, to get important documents and some clothes. The house was exactly as I'd left it, almost as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Every corner now held a question. How many times had Julian called Isabella from this sofa while I was making dinner? How many texts had they exchanged while I slept beside him? In Julian's office, I turned on his computer, grateful that I knew his password. The name of his first dog, followed by the year we met. A sentimental password for a man who lived a lie. The financial files revealed a story Mr. Davies had predicted. Over the last 6 years, large sums had been transferred to accounts I didn't recognize, properties purchased under the name of a company I'd never heard of. I even found documents for an educational fund for a Leo, a name that meant nothing to me. My hands trembled when I found a folder labeled Family. Inside were photos of Julian with Isabella and a little boy, maybe 3 or 4 years old. The dates on the photos indicated he'd been born about 5 years ago. The discovery of that child, Leo, was the most painful blow. For years, I had dreamed of being a mother. I had endured hormones, disappointments, and the silent grief of every failed cycle. And all that time, Julian was already a father. He would come home from his conferences, hold me as I cried after another negative test, all while knowing he had a son growing up in another house. I copied all the files I could find and sent them to my email and to Mr. Davies. Then, something inside me snapped. I took our wedding photo from the wall and threw it against the fireplace. The glass shattered, just like my illusions about the man who had promised to love me forever. I was gathering some clothes in the bedroom when I heard the front door open. Julian walked in, looking surprised to see me. "I thought you were at your sister's," he said cautiously. "I came to get my things, and I found your son." The color drained from his face. "Eleanor, I can explain." "Explain what? That you comforted me through my tears about not being able to have children while you had a boy growing up in another house? That every fertility treatment we went through was a sham?" "It wasn't like that," he protested weakly. "How was it then? Tell me, Julian, on the nights you held me after another failed treatment, were you thinking of him? Of your real son?" Julian leaned against the wall as if he needed physical support. Leah wasn't planned. It happened right at the beginning with Isabella. And you decided to keep both relationships, to have your perfect family with her, while you kept the trophy wife at home. You were never a trophy to me, Eleanor. No? Then what was I? The fool who believed in you for 26 years? The convenient woman who maintained your home? Who hosted your clients for dinner parties? Who never questioned your absences or your lies? He didn't answer, and his silence was more devastating than any explanation could ever be. I'm taking what's mine now, I said, my voice surprisingly firm. The lawyers will sort out the rest. As I walked out with my bags, Julian called my name. Are you really going to go through with this? Destroy everything we built? I stopped at the door, looking back at him one last time. I didn't destroy anything, Julian. You already did that 6 years ago. I'm just finally discovering the rubble. Closing the door on that house, on my former life, I felt a strange mixture of devastation and liberation. The woman who walked into that company 2 days ago no longer existed. In her place was someone who had just discovered her entire adult life was built on quicksand, but who was, somehow, still standing. The following days passed in a roller coaster of emotions. Rage and sadness alternated with periods of emotional numbness where I could barely get out of bed. Clara was my safe harbor, alternating between offering a shoulder to cry on and forcing me to eat, shower, and keep existing. He's calling again, she said, holding out my phone as it rang for the 3rd time that morning. You can answer and tell him to talk to my lawyer. Clara took the phone, but her brow furrowed as she looked at the screen. It's not Julian. It's a number I don't know. Reluctantly, I took the call. Hello? Mrs. Vance, this is Frank from security at Croft Innovations. It was the man who had inadvertently revealed my husband's betrayal. What do you want? Ma'am, I feel terrible about what happened. I had no idea about the situation. I thought I should call you because... He hesitated. I think there are more things you should know. I met Frank at a small coffee shop, far from Croft Innovations. He seemed nervous, constantly checking the door as if he feared being discovered. Why are you helping me? I asked directly. He sighed deeply. My ex-wife did the same thing to me 7 years ago. When I found out, no one wanted to help me. Everyone knew and just kept quiet. Frank then told me what he knew. Isabella wasn't just the other woman. She was the company's chief financial officer, hired by Julian 6 years ago. Their relationship began almost immediately, and their son, Leo, was born the following year. But what worries me most isn't their personal life, Frank said, lowering his voice. For the last couple of years, I've seen strange documents passing through security, large transfers to offshore accounts, secret meetings with investors who don't appear on the official records. Are you suggesting there's something illegal happening at the company? I asked, stunned by this new twist. I'm not sure, but something doesn't look right. And ever since you showed up, Mr. Croft and Mrs. Rossi have been in closed-door meetings constantly. I heard them mention speeding up the plan. I thanked Frank for the information and returned to Clara's apartment, my mind reeling with this new layer of complexity. If Julian and Isabella were involved in suspicious financial activities, it might explain the money he was siphoning from our joint accounts. I immediately called Mr. Davies and told him what I had discovered. This changes our strategy, he said, concern evident in his voice. If there's financial fraud involved, we need to act even more quickly to protect your interests. And if they're planning to flee the country, do you think they'd do that? I've seen cases like it before. If they're involved in illegal activities and feel they're about to be discovered, fleeing can seem like the only option. The next day, Mr. Davies filed for a freeze on all our assets and presented the court with the evidence we had gathered about the suspicious transfers. The judge, convinced of the urgency, granted the temporary order. Julian called furious, less than an hour later. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he yelled as soon as I answered. You froze our accounts. There's an entire company depending on that money. Maybe you should have thought of that before you transferred millions of dollars to accounts overseas, I replied calmly. A heavy silence followed. What are you talking about? Don't insult my intelligence, Julian. I found the records. I know about the phantom investments, the transfers to the Cayman Islands. You don't understand any of this, he hissed. You're meddling in things that go far beyond our marriage. Maybe, but if there's something illegal going on, I'm sure the authorities would be interested. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you the same consideration you gave me for the last 6 years. None. I hung up and immediately blocked his number. If he wanted to communicate, it would have to be through Mr. Davies. That evening, I had an unexpected visitor. The doorbell to Clara's apartment rang around 9. When I opened it, I found an elegant woman in a flawless blazer. Isabella. Can we talk? She asked, her voice surprisingly soft. My first instinct was to slam the door in her face, but something in her expression made me hesitate. There was no triumph there, only an exhaustion I recognized from my own mirror. I let her in, grateful that Clara was out for dinner with her boyfriend. Why are you here? I asked, without offering a seat or coffee. Isabella remained standing, looking uncomfortable. I came because I think there are things you need to know about Julian, things I maybe noticed too late. Like the fact he was married when he started a relationship with you? She winced. He told me you were separated, that you only stayed married on paper for financial reasons. The lie was so predictable, I almost laughed. Of course he did. I only found out the truth about a year ago, she continued. I found photos of you together on a recent trip. When I confronted Julian, he admitted he was still living with you, but he said he was just waiting for the right time to file for divorce. And you believed him, even after finding out he'd lied about our marriage? Isabella looked at the floor. We have a son together, and there were other complicating factors. The financial schemes, you mean? Her head snapped up. So, you know. I know enough to understand something illegal is happening at the company. Isabella walked to the window, watching the night for a moment before turning back to me. Julian has been embezzling funds from the company for almost 3 years. At first, it was small amounts for side investments. Then it became larger transfers to overseas accounts. And you, as the CFO, allowed it. I helped cover the tracks, she admitted. But in the last few months, things have gotten out of control. Julian started doing business with dangerous people. When I tried to question him, he got furious. She pulled up the sleeve of her blazer, revealing yellowish bruises on her wrist. This was 2 weeks ago. That's when I realized I needed to protect my son. I stared at the bruises, a new horror adding to everything I'd already discovered. Julian? Violent? That was a side of him I had never seen. What do you want from me? I asked. I'm planning to cooperate with the authorities, Isabella said, her face a mask of determination. I have enough evidence to incriminate Julian for corporate fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering, but I need guarantees of immunity for myself and safety for my son. And where do I fit into this? Your lawyer filed to freeze the accounts. That sped everything up. Julian is desperate, planning to flee the country tomorrow. He has fake passports for all 3 of us. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. He was just going to disappear. With all the money? That was always his end game, Isabella said bitterly. Use the company to build up illegal funds, then disappear to a country with no extradition. What he didn't count on was you finding out about us before he was ready. I sat down, trying to process this new reality. The man I had shared my life with wasn't just a liar and a cheater. He was a criminal on the verge of fleeing the country. Why are you telling me this now? Because I need your help to stop him, Isabella answered. It's the only way I can guarantee safety for my son. And because, as strange as it sounds, I think I owe you this. I looked at this woman who, until 2 days ago I had considered my enemy. Now I realized we were perhaps both victims of the same manipulative man, albeit in different ways. "What do you propose?" I finally asked. A plan began to form, a way to catch Julian red-handed, with enough evidence to ensure he faced justice. But we had to act fast. We had less than 24 hours. In that moment, I made a decision that would change the course of all our lives. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Davies. "I need you to contact the authorities immediately," I said, "and we're going to need your conference room for an urgent meeting." After hanging up, I faced Isabella. A silent alliance had formed between the two women Julian thought he had under control. Now, that control was about to slip right through his fingers. The conference room at Mr. Davies' office was lit only by the bluish glow of a laptop screen as Commander Soto finished listening to our story. It was well past midnight, but the urgency of the situation didn't allow for waiting until morning. "Let me summarize," Soto said, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes that seemed to miss no detail. "We have a CEO who has embezzled approximately $20 million from his own company. He maintained 2 separate families for years, and now he plans to flee the country tomorrow night with false documents." "That's exactly it," confirmed Isabella, who had brought a binder of documents detailing the fraudulent transactions of the last 3 years. "And you," he turned to me, "as the legally married wife, had no knowledge of these activities until you discovered Mrs. Rossi's existence." "Julian always kept our finances separate," I replied. "He deposited a generous allowance in my account and said he was investing the rest for our future." Soto nodded, taking notes. "What we have here justifies not only an investigation for financial fraud, but also for identity fraud, tax evasion, and possibly even bigamy, depending on how the ceremony with Mrs. Rossi was conducted." "It wasn't a legal marriage," Isabella clarified. "It was just a symbolic ceremony for my family, but Julian signed documents for Leo's school as if we were married." "That's identity fraud," Mr. Davies confirmed. "What concerns us now is how to proceed to ensure Mr. Croft doesn't escape justice." "The flight is scheduled for tomorrow at 11:45 p.m., Isabella said. "A private jet to Dubai, then a connection to a destination he didn't disclose to me." "We need to catch him with the evidence," Soto said. "Not just the documents you brought, but also the fake passports, and ideally, catch him in the act of trying to leave the country." A plan began to take shape. Isabella would return home as if nothing had happened. She agreed to wear a recording device to document any confession Julian might make about his escape plans and illicit financial activities. "We need you to keep him talking about the details of the trip," Soto instructed. "Ask about the passports, about the offshore accounts, about how he intends to access the money once they're out of the country." Isabella nodded, her face pale but determined. "And what about Leo? I don't want him present when you make the arrest." "We can arrange for him to be in a safe place," Soto guaranteed, "perhaps with a trusted family member." "My mother can pick him up from school tomorrow," Isabella said. "Julian won't suspect that. She often stays with Leo when we have evening commitments." As the details of the plan were ironed out, I remained silent, observing this strange alliance between the police, my lawyer, and the woman I didn't even know existed 2 days ago. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. Isabella and I, both deceived in different ways by the same man, now united to stop him. When the meeting ended, it was almost 2 in the morning. Isabella got up to leave but hesitated at the door. "Eleanor," she said, my name sounding strange on her lips. "As bizarre as this sounds, thank you. You could have treated me like an enemy, but you chose to listen." "We're not enemies," I replied tiredly. "We're just 2 women who made the mistake of loving the same lying man." She nodded, a faint, sad smile crossing her face. "I don't think we ever really knew Julian, did we? Not me, not you." After Isabella left, Soto approached me with a compassionate look. "Mrs. Vance, I understand this is an extremely difficult time, but your cooperation is crucial. We need you to stay completely away from Julian until the time of the arrest. Any contact could alert him. Don't worry, Commander. I have no desire to see him again until he's in handcuffs. The next morning, the wait was agonizing. Every minute dragged on as I tried to occupy my mind with anything other than thoughts of what was to come. Clara had been informed of the plan and insisted on staying with me, canceling her work commitments. You don't have to do this, I protested weakly. Yes, I do, she insisted. No sister of mine is going through this alone. Around 4 p.m., I received a text message from an unknown number. Leo is safe with my mother, and he confirmed our flight for tonight. Everything is on schedule. The operation was underway. Isabella had managed to get her son to safety, and Julian suspected nothing. Now it was just a matter of time. At 6 p.m., Soto called with an update. The police had teams positioned at the executive airport from which the jet would depart. Another team would follow Julian and Isabella from their house to the airport. Everything was ready. We'd like you to be present at the time of the arrest, Soto said. As the legal wife and one of the primary victims, your presence strengthens the case. The idea of witnessing Julian's downfall brought a mix of feelings. Part of me wanted to be as far away as possible. Another part needed to see his face when he realized his house of cards had collapsed. I'll be there, I confirmed. At 10:30 p.m., an unmarked police car picked me up from Clara's apartment. Commander Soto was at the wheel with another officer in the passenger seat. We have confirmation they're leaving the house, Soto reported as we drove. 2 agents report Julian is loading 3 large suitcases into the car, plus a briefcase that likely contains the documents and passports. We arrived at the small private airport on the outskirts of the city through a secondary entrance. The night was clear, stars dotting the dark sky in a surreal contrast to the human drama about to unfold. Soto positioned me in an observation room with a view of the tarmac. When they arrive, let us make the initial approach. After the situation is under control, we'll call for you, ma'am. I nodded silently, my heart hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Around 11:15 p.m., the headlights of a car appeared at the airport entrance. Julian's black SUV moved slowly toward the hangar where a sleek jet awaited, its navigation lights already on. I watched through the glass as Julian got out of the car, looking at his watch impatiently. He was dressed formally as if going to a business meeting, not fleeing like a criminal. Isabella got out of the passenger side, her body language tense as she looked around nervously. A ground assistant approached to help with the bags, but before he could reach them, several police cars emerged from different directions, surrounding the vehicle. Soto and his team got out quickly, weapons drawn. "Julian Croft!" Soto's voice boomed through a megaphone. "You are under arrest on suspicion of financial fraud, identity fraud, and attempting to flee the country. Keep your hands where we can see them and do not make any sudden movements." Even from a distance, I could see the transformation on Julian's face, from shock to panic, then to realization as his gaze locked onto Isabella. The betrayal was clear in his eyes, but there was something almost comical in the indignation of a man who had betrayed everyone around him for years, now furious at being deceived himself. Soto led Isabella away, while other officers handcuffed Julian and began to search the bags. When the situation was under control, Soto came to get me. "He's asking to speak with you," the commander said. "You are not obligated to do so." "No," I replied, surprising myself. "I want to look him in the eye one last time." Julian was sitting in the back of a police car, his hands cuffed in front of him. When he saw me approach, his expression shifted to something that tried to resemble contrition. "Eleanor," he said as I drew near, "this is a misunderstanding. I can explain everything." "Explain what, Julian? The 2 families? The millions embezzled? The fake passports?" "You don't understand the pressure I've been under," he whispered urgently. "I did this for us, for our future." The audacity of the lie made me laugh, a humorless sound that seemed to startle him. For us. Which us, exactly? You and me, you and Isabella, or you and the money you were about to run away with? His face hardened. You know nothing about business. Sometimes we need to make tough decisions to— Stop, I interrupted. No more lies. You'll have plenty of time in prison to invent new stories. I turned to leave, but he shouted my name again. When I turned back, I saw something I had never seen before on Julian's face. Genuine fear. What's going to happen now? He asked, his voice stripped of its usual confidence. Now? Now you face the consequences of your choices, something you've probably never had to do before. As I walked away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The man I had loved for nearly 3 decades was a stranger to me. Perhaps he always had been. In the makeshift interrogation room at the airport, I found Isabella being interviewed by another detective. She looked exhausted but relieved. "Is Leo okay?" I asked, sitting beside her. "Yes," she replied, surprised by my concern. "My mother will keep him away from the news for a few days until I can explain." Somehow. "Children are more resilient than we think," I said softly. "He'll be okay." "And you?" Isabella asked, her eyes studying my face. "How are you?" The question took me by surprise. How was I? Betrayed, used, deceived for years, but also, strangely, free. I hesitated, searching for the right word. I'm different, and I think that's a good thing. When I finally left the airport, the sky was beginning to lighten on the horizon. A new day was dawning, the first of many in a life that would no longer be defined by Julian Croft's lies. In the weeks following Julian's arrest, my life became a whirlwind of statements, meetings with lawyers, and increasingly shocking revelations about the man I was married to for 26 years. The investigation revealed that the financial scheme was even more extensive than Isabella had suspected. Julian wasn't just embezzling funds from the company. He had set up an elaborate network of shell companies to launder money for some of the country's most disreputable clients. As the layers of fraud were peeled back, it became clear he was involved with truly dangerous people, including international cartels that used Croft Innovations to clean illicit capital. "You were very lucky," Commander Soto commented during one of our meetings for my formal statement. If Julian had managed to escape, those organizations would have likely come after him and after anyone associated with him. The press had a field day with the story. CEO led double life, and $1 million fraud and 2 wives were some of the milder headlines. I refused all interview requests, staying secluded in Clara's apartment as the media storm unfolded. Mr. Davies worked tirelessly to protect my legal interests. As the legal wife, I could technically be considered an accomplice in Julian's crimes if I couldn't prove my complete ignorance of his activities. Fortunately, Isabella's testimony and the evidence of my deliberate exclusion from the business were enough to clear me of any liability. The most disturbing part, however, came when the police searched Julian's personal office in our house, a room he always kept locked, claiming he needed privacy to work. Inside a safe embedded in the wall, they found not only documents related to the financial frauds, but also a detailed contingency plan in case his scheme was discovered. Commander Soto handed me a copy of the document, his expression grave. "You should be prepared. The contents are disturbing." Plan B, as Julian had titled it, meticulously outlined how he intended to frame me if his illegal activities were exposed. He had collected my signature on various documents over the years, many of which I had signed, trusting they were related to our joint investments. In reality, they were powers of attorney and authorizations that could link me directly to his activities. If necessary, EV is to be positioned as a willing accomplice, read one particularly chilling excerpt. Sufficient evidence has been planted to suggest her knowledge and participation. Her signature is on key documents that can be backdated. E.V. Eleanor Vance. My name reduced to initials in a plan to make me the scapegoat if his criminal empire crumbled. He was really going to throw me to the wolves? I murmured, a hollow feeling in my stomach. It appears so, Soto confirmed, but the plan depended on him having time to organize the fabricated evidence. Our swift intervention prevented that. And if you hadn't acted in time, would I be the one under arrest instead? It's a possibility we can't rule out. Men like Julian Croft always have an escape plan, and it rarely includes loyalty to those who trust them. The discovery of this contingency plan was, in many ways, more devastating than the initial betrayal. It was one thing to find out my husband had another family. It was another thing entirely to realize he was willing to send me to prison to save his own skin. On a particularly difficult afternoon, after another exhaustive meeting with investigators, I received an unexpected call. "Eleanor, it's Isabella. I'm at the coffee shop near your lawyer's office. Can we talk?" That first real conversation with Isabella, without the pressure of an immediate crisis or the presence of lawyers and police, was strangely liberating. Sitting at a corner table, two women drinking coffee, we could have been just friends meeting up, not two people whose lives had been ravaged by the same man. "Leo asks about his father," she said, staring into her cup. "I don't know what to tell him." "How old is he again?" 4. Too old not to notice his father's absence, too young to understand the truth. I nodded, imagining how difficult it would be to explain something so complex to a child. "What are you telling him for now?" "That his dad is away on a work trip, but that's not going to last long." She sighed. "The lawyers say, with the evidence we have, Julian will likely face at least 12 years. Leo will be 16 when he gets out, an entire childhood without a father. As much as Julian deserved his punishment, the sadness for the innocent child was genuine. Maybe you can tell him he made mistakes and needs to fix things," I suggested. "It's not a lie. And it allows Leo to understand that actions have consequences, even for adults." Isabella nodded thoughtfully. "That might work." She hesitated, then continued. "By the way, I also came to thank you. The commander told me about Julian's contingency plan. It seems he was ready to sacrifice us, both of us. Typical of him, isn't it? Always thinking only of himself." "Did you ever wonder?" Isabella started, then stopped, as if reconsidering. "What?" "If he ever loved either of us, truly." The question hung between us, heavy with implications. I had asked myself that countless times since the discovery. "I think he loved the idea of us," I finally answered. "He loved what we represented in different aspects of his life. I was the respectable wife, the social anchor, the proof of his conventional success. You were the business partner, the accomplice in his ambitions, the mother of his son. But we weren't real people to him. We were just assets, possessions," Isabella completed my thought. "Exactly. And when possessions become liabilities, you get rid of them." We sat in silence for a moment, each absorbing the harsh truth of this realization. "What are you going to do now?" Isabella asked finally, "after all of this is settled?" The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on surviving the present that I had barely thought about the future. "Honestly, I have no idea. The house is being sold to pay back the fraud victims. Almost all our money is frozen pending the investigation. I'm practically starting from scratch at 61. "Me too," Isabella said with a wry smile. "Although the immunity deal saved me from jail, my career in finance is effectively over. Who would hire a former CFO implicated in a multi-million-dollar fraud, even as a whistleblower?" "At least you have Leo," I observed, a hint of envy surprising me. "He gives you a purpose to start over." Isabella studied my face. "Did you always want children?" "Yes," I admitted. "We did fertility treatments that didn't work. Now I understand why Julian never seemed as devastated as I was by the failures. He already had a son." "He never showed interest in having more children with me," Isabella said. "Whenever I mentioned giving Leo a sibling, he'd change the subject. Typical. One son to show off was enough. More children would mean more complications for his double life. We finished our coffee with a strange sense of camaraderie. Two women who should be enemies, finding solace in the shared understanding of how they had been deceived by the same man. As we said goodbye, Isabella hesitated. "Eleanor, I know this might sound strange, but would it be so terrible if we kept in touch? There's something comforting about talking to someone who actually gets it." The suggestion should have seemed absurd, befriending the other woman. But nothing in my life followed conventional rules anymore. "I think I'd like that," I replied, surprising myself with the sincerity of the answer. On the way back to Clara's apartment, I reflected on how life can change so drastically in such a short time. 3 weeks ago, I was Eleanor Vance, devoted wife of a successful CEO, living in a beautiful house and believing I had a solid marriage. Now I was Eleanor Vance again. I had decided to go back to my maiden name, practically homeless with an uncertain financial future, and a marriage exposed as an elaborate sham. Still, there was something liberating in facing the truth, however painful. Julian's lies had been comfortable in their ignorance, but the reality, even in its brutality, offered the chance to build something genuine. When I got to the apartment, Clara was out, having left a note on the fridge. "Mail for you on the table, looks important." The envelope was from Mr. Davies's office. Inside, an official document informed me that the court had authorized a temporary allowance from Julian's frozen accounts for my basic subsistence while the case unfolded. A small victory in the midst of the chaos, but it was the second document that truly captured my attention. It was a proposal from a publisher, forwarded by Mr. Davies, asking me to consider writing a book about my experience. "Your story has all the elements of a powerful tale of betrayal, resilience, and rebuilding," the letter said. "We believe it could help many people who have gone through similar experiences of deceit and broken trust." I sat on the small apartment balcony watching the sunset as I considered the proposal. To transform my pain into something that could help others? Maybe that was exactly the purpose I was looking for. I picked up my phone and sent a message to Isabella. "I just got a proposal to write a book about this whole experience. What do you think?" Her reply came quickly. "I think you should do it. If anyone can turn this nightmare into something meaningful, it's you." I smiled at the phone, appreciating the vote of confidence from this unlikely ally. As the sky turned shades of orange and purple, I began to imagine what my story could be. Not the story of a victim, but of a survivor. Not a tale of betrayal, but of liberation. Night was falling on the city, and with it, the promise of a new chapter was just beginning to be written. 6 months had passed since the night of Julian's arrest. Fall had given way to winter, and now spring was beginning to emerge, bringing with it the promise of renewal I so desperately needed. I had moved out of Clara's apartment and into a small rented flat, paid for with the allowance the court had granted me. It was modest compared to the spacious house where I lived with Julian, but there was a comfort in its simplicity. Every object in it was truly mine. Every decision about the space reflected only my preferences. The legal process against Julian continued to unfold with the characteristic slowness of the justice system. He had hired an expensive team of lawyers who were exploring every possible procedural loophole, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Still, the final trial was likely months away. In the meantime, I was finding my own way. I accepted the publisher's proposal and began working on the book, a therapeutic process that forced me to examine the 26 years of my marriage under a new light. Every memory had to be re-evaluated, every happy moment questioned for its authenticity. On a sunny April afternoon, I sat at an outdoor cafe with my laptop, working on a particularly difficult chapter about the fertility treatments. I was so engrossed that I didn't immediately notice when someone stopped beside my table. Eleanor? I looked up to see Isabella holding Leo's hand. The boy had the same brown eyes as his father, but his open, curious expression was completely different from Julian's calculating one. "Isabella, what a surprise," I said, closing my laptop. "And this must be Leo." The little boy looked at me with interest. "Did you know my daddy?" The innocent question took me by surprise. I glanced at Isabella, who gave a slight nod, as if giving me permission. "Yes, Leo, I knew your daddy very well." "He did bad things," Leo said with the direct frankness of children. "Mommy said that's why he's away, to fix his mistakes." "Is your mommy right?" I answered carefully. "Sometimes adults make big mistakes and they need to deal with the consequences, like when I break a toy and have to go without it." I smiled, admiring the simplicity of the analogy. "Something like that, yes, just on a much bigger scale." Isabella seemed relieved by my response. "Leo, why don't you go pick out a treat at the counter while I talk to Eleanor? You can ask the lady for help." As the boy happily scampered off, Isabella sat down across from me. "Sorry to just show up like this. We saw you from the street and Leo insisted on saying hi. You don't have to apologize. He's adorable. He's been asking more about his dad lately," she said, watching her son at the counter. "His friends at school talk about their dads. They ask questions. It's hard to explain." "You're doing the best you can," I assured her. "He seems to be handling it well. We're seeing a child therapist. It helps a lot." She paused. "And you? How's the book coming along?" "It's moving," I replied. "It's strange to put it all into words, to relive certain moments. But it's also healing in a way. Have you decided how you're going to portray me?" she asked with a hesitant smile. The question had been discussed before. Since our first conversations after the arrest, we had developed a strange friendship. We met occasionally for coffee. We exchanged messages about updates on the case, a camaraderie born from shared understanding. "As you are," I answered honestly, a woman who was also deceived, who made questionable choices under the influence of a skilled manipulator, but who ultimately chose to do the right thing. Her eyes welled with unshed tears. "Thank you for that." "Not everyone has been so understanding." I knew what she meant. Though the immunity deal had protected her legally, Isabella faced her own social judgment. Former colleagues avoided her. Friends distanced themselves. Society often had an easier time forgiving a man for his crimes than a woman for her association with him. Leo returned with a huge chocolate cookie, interrupting the vulnerable moment. "Mommy, can I show Eleanor my new drawing?" "Of course, sweetheart." He carefully opened his small, colorful backpack and pulled out a crayon drawing. "It's our family," he explained proudly. The drawing showed 3 figures: a larger woman with yellow hair, Isabella, a boy in blue, himself, and a smaller figure beside them that looked like a girl. "Who's this?" I asked, pointing to the 3rd figure. "My little sister," he answered as if it were obvious. "She's still in Mommy's tummy, but she's coming out soon." I looked at Isabella, surprise written all over my face. She blushed slightly. "I was going to tell you today, actually," she said quietly. "I'm 4 months pregnant." "Isabella, that's... wow. I'm so happy for you, and surprisingly, I meant it. It's Julio's," she clarified quickly. "That music teacher I mentioned. We've been together for almost 3 months. He plays the guitar and teaches me cool songs," Leo added enthusiastically. I looked at the 2 of them, this small, forming family, and felt a mix of emotions. A twinge of envy, yes, but mostly a genuine joy that Isabella was rebuilding her life. "You deserve to be happy," I said, reaching out and briefly squeezing her hand. After they left, I returned to my laptop with a new perspective. As I wrote about my journey, I realized I had been focusing too much on the past, on the betrayal and the pain. But the real story, the one that truly mattered, was about the future, about rebuilding and discovery. That night, I received a call from Mr. Davies. "I have important news," he said without preamble. "The judge has issued a preliminary ruling on your rights to the assets not directly tied to Julian's fraudulent activities. And the court has recognized you as a victim, not an accomplice. That means you'll be entitled to a significant portion of the legitimate assets that remain after restitution to the fraud victims." "How much?" I asked, trying not to get my hopes up. Enough for a comfortable new beginning. "You won't be rich, Eleanor, but you will have financial stability." After I hung up, I sat on my apartment's small balcony, watching the city lights. Financial stability. The phrase resonated in my mind like a promise. It wasn't about getting back the luxurious life I had with Julian. I didn't even want that anymore. It was about having the resources to build something new, something genuinely mine. The next morning, spurred by a renewed energy, I did something I had been putting off for months. I visited the fertility clinic where Julian and I had undergone treatment. Dr. Sofia Rivas, the specialist who had been with us through the process, seemed surprised to see me. "Eleanor, it's good to see you. I'm so sorry for everything you've been through. I saw the news." "Thank you, doctor. I'm actually here to ask some questions about our previous treatments." She frowned, confused. "Of course. What would you like to know? Did the treatments really fail because of biological issues? Or was there something else?" The doctor looked at me with an intrigued expression, as if trying to decipher the true meaning of my question. "What are you asking exactly, Eleanor?" I took a deep breath, gathering the courage to voice my suspicions. "Doctor, after uncovering so many lies, I've started to question everything. Julian had a child with another woman while we were undergoing treatment here. I need to know if our treatments really failed naturally or if he sabotaged them in some way." Dr. Rivas's face paled and her gaze flickered for a moment. That brief shift of her eyes gave me the answer before she even spoke. "Eleanor, that's a very serious accusation. It's not an accusation, doctor. It's a question, and your reaction already tells me something." She sighed deeply and gestured for me to sit. After a few moments of silence, she seemed to make a difficult ethical decision. "About 4 years ago, Julian came to see me privately. He said he was concerned about the stress the treatments were causing you and wanted to verify his own contribution to the process." She paused. "He requested his sperm be analyzed separately without your knowledge, and the results were perfectly normal. More than that, the count and motility were above average. There was no biological reason on his part for the difficulty in conceiving. And in the subsequent attempts..." The doctor visibly hesitated. "Please, doctor, I need to know the truth." After that private consultation, Julian started requesting that we take certain special precautions. He said you had discussed it and decided to lower the chances for a few more months while you recovered emotionally. The shock ran through me like an electric current. I never had that conversation with him. "I feared as much," she admitted, looking genuinely distressed. "He even forged your signature on a consent form. At the time, I didn't question it because it seemed plausible. Many couples ask for a pause without completely abandoning the process. What exactly did he ask you to do? He requested we reduce the hormone dosage and alter the timing of the insemination to less favorable points in your cycle." She looked at me with eyes heavy with guilt. "Eleanor, if I had suspected you weren't aware of this..." I held up a hand, interrupting her. I couldn't quite breathe. Julian had deliberately sabotaged my chances of becoming a mother while he had a son growing up in another house. The nights I spent crying in his arms after each negative result, the comfort he offered as I questioned my own ability to bear life. It was all part of a cruel theater. "Why?" I whispered, more to myself than to the doctor. "Why would he do that?" "I can't answer that," Dr. Rivas said softly. "But as a doctor who has seen many complex family dynamics, I can say that some men, like your ex-husband, prefer to keep their lives in separate compartments. A child in each relationship would represent an unwanted bridge between those worlds." I sat in silence, absorbing the impact of this new betrayal. When I finally spoke, my voice was strangely calm. "Doctor, my tests always showed that I was perfectly capable of conceiving, didn't they? Yes, your eggs were healthy, your uterus receptive. There was no medical reason you shouldn't have gotten pregnant with the proper treatment. And now, at 61, would it still be possible? She studied me for a moment, understanding the weight of the question. Fertility does decline with age, as you know, but you're in excellent health, and your previous tests were very favorable. With the right treatment, there are definitely possibilities. I left the clinic with a mix of emotions so intense I could barely identify them individually. Rage, grief, betrayal, but also, surprisingly, hope. The possibility I thought I had lost forever still existed, however faint. In the following days, I re-examined my options with a clarity I hadn't had in years. The decision to try to become a mother alone at 61 was not simple, but the knowledge that Julian had actively denied me, that choice strengthened my resolve. One morning in May, exactly 7 months after the initial discovery at Croft Innovations, I received an unexpected call. "Mrs. Vance, this is Frank from security. Do you remember me?" The man who had inadvertently revealed the whole truth. "Of course I remember, Frank. How are you?" "Good, all things considered. The company is going through a complete restructuring after everything that happened." He paused. "I'm actually calling because I found something that might be of interest to you." He explained that while clearing out a rarely used storage area in the company building, he discovered a box with my name on it. It seems to contain personal items, old photographs, some documents. I thought you might want to know. The next day, I met Frank at the coffee shop near the old Croft Innovations. He carried a worn cardboard box, which he handed over with a supportive smile. I hope it helps somehow. Inside the box, I found fragments of my past that Julian had hidden over the years. Family albums I thought were lost during a move. Letters from my deceased parents that I never got to read. A collection of memories he had systematically removed from our home, claiming accidental loss or damage. But the item that made my heart stop was a yellowed envelope addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. She had passed away 8 years ago. The date in the corner showed it had been sent a month before her death, but I had never received it. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and found a letter and a small antique key. "My dearest Eleanor," the letter began. "As we discussed on your last visit, I'm sending you the key to the family safe deposit box. Your father always wanted you to have access to our life savings when the time was right. Now that both he and I are facing health issues, I think it's prudent to ensure you have this in your hands." The letter went on with detailed instructions about the safe deposit box at a bank back in the small town where my parents had lived their whole lives. A box whose contents I never knew existed because Julian had intercepted the mail. 2 weeks later, I sat in the manager's office of the small regional bank, watching as he opened the safe deposit box. Inside, I found a modest but significant treasure. Some family jewelry, important documents, and most surprisingly, a record of investments made by my father over decades. Investments that had grown silently all those years. "From what I see here, Mrs. Vance, the current value is over $800,000, the manager said, analyzing the documents. "Your father was very cautious and smart with his applications. $800,000. It wasn't a life-changing fortune, but it was exactly what I needed at that moment. Real financial independence and the means to start over, genuinely. That night, sitting on the balcony of my small apartment, I made several important decisions. First, I would use part of the money to buy my own apartment. Nothing fancy, but a place that was truly mine. Second, I would invest in a small image consulting business I had always dreamed of opening, leveraging my experience as a corporate wife who organized important events and dinners. And third, most importantly, I would set aside an amount to try and fulfill my dream of becoming a mother. The next morning, I scheduled a consultation with Dr. Rivas to discuss my fertilization options. For the first time in almost a year, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny, not as a victim of an elaborate lie, but as the architect of my own reconstruction. As I walked through the city streets that afternoon, I received a message from Isabella. Just heard about the court's decision on the assets. So glad you'll get what you deserve. Lunch next week to celebrate? I smiled at my phone, appreciating the irony of finding an ally in the person who, by all social conventions, should have been my enemy. I replied, "Yes, but I have even better news to share, and this time it's on me." The afternoon sun bathed the city in golden hues as I continued on my way, each step lighter than the last. Julian had stolen years of my life with his lies, but the future, with all its uncertainties and promises, that belonged entirely to me. 1 year after that fateful visit to Croft Innovations, my life had completely transformed. The modest but cozy apartment I bought had become a true home. Every object, every color, every detail reflected only my choices, with no compromises or concessions. My small corporate image consulting and event planning business, New Phase, was starting to gain regular clients. Ironically, the book I wrote about my experience with Julian attracted more attention than I expected. The Sign on the Door. How I Survived a Marriage of Lies became a moderate success, especially among women who had gone through similar, though less dramatic, betrayals. But the most significant and terrifying change in my life was growing inside me. At 16 weeks pregnant, I was finally realizing the dream that Julian had actively sabotaged for years. "How are you feeling today?" asked Caroline, my therapist, during our weekly session. "Physically or emotionally?" I replied with a small smile, stroking my still barely visible belly. "Both. Physically, better. The nausea has finally subsided. Emotionally, I hesitated, searching for the right words. It's complicated. I'm extremely happy, but I also have moments of absolute panic thinking about raising a child alone." Caroline nodded understandingly. "What worries you most about being a single mother?" "Everything?" I laughed nervously. From practical issues like balancing work and motherhood to deeper concerns about how to explain the father's absence when she's older. I had opted for fertilization with an anonymous donor after long consideration. The decision wasn't easy, but the idea of having a man permanently connected to my life through a child, even if only biologically, seemed too complicated after everything I'd been through with Julian. "You've built a solid support network," Caroline observed. "Your sister, your friends, even your unlikely friendship with Isabella." I smiled at the thought of Isabella, who was now 7 months pregnant. Our connection had evolved into a genuine friendship, bonded by our shared experience and the simultaneous journey into motherhood, albeit under very different circumstances. That's true. But I still have nightmares where Julian shows up demanding some kind of connection to my daughter, claiming that somehow she's his responsibility too, even from prison. Julian had been sentenced to 12 years for his financial frauds. The trial had been a media spectacle that I followed from a distance, refusing to attend personally except when my testimony was absolutely necessary. It's irrational, I know. He has no legal right to my daughter. But after discovering so many manipulations, it's hard not to fear he'll find some way to interfere in my life again. "The fear makes sense given your experience," Caroline said. "But remember, you are no longer the same woman he so easily manipulated. You've rebuilt your life on your own terms. I left therapy reflecting on that truth. The Eleanor who existed before the discovery of the betrayal seemed like a stranger now, too trusting, too naive, too defined by her role as wife of." That afternoon, I met Isabella for our now traditional weekly tea. She arrived at the cafe with Leo, now 5, who was extremely excited about the idea of having a little sister soon. "Aunt Eleanor," he exclaimed upon seeing me, running to hug me with the spontaneity only children possess. "Mommy said you're going to have a baby, too." "That's right, Leo," I confirmed, smiling at his enthusiasm. "A girl, like my sister. They can be friends." Isabella and I exchanged amused glances over his innocence. Our babies, connected by the strange coincidence of us being deceived by the same man. Was it fate laughing at us or offering some kind of redemption? Julio sends his regards, Isabella said, referring to the music teacher she was now engaged to. He's putting together the baby's room today. How are the wedding preparations going? Simple and discreet, exactly how we want it. Just close family and a few friends. She hesitated, then added, "We hope you'll come." The idea of attending Isabella's wedding to Julio still felt surreal, but in a comforting way. Amidst all the destruction Julian caused, something positive had emerged, this unlikely friendship. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I assured her. As we chatted about preparations for the babies, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Mr. Davies, my lawyer. "Sorry, I need to check this," I murmured, opening the message. The subject was simple and direct. Contact from the penitentiary. My stomach went cold as I read. "Eleanor, Julian has requested authorization to send you a letter. By law, he has that right unless you obtain a specific restraining order. We need to talk about how to proceed." Isabella noticed my expression. "He doesn't give up, does he?" she commented, her voice bitter. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to cut off any possibility of contact forever. Another part wants to know what he has to say, Isabella completed, understanding perfectly. It's ridiculous, isn't it? After everything he did. "It's not ridiculous," she said gently. "It's human. We spent years believing this man loved us. It's natural to want some kind of closure, explanation, anything to make sense of the senseless." Leo, bored with the adult conversation, had taken a small book from his backpack and was flipping through the colorful pages, oblivious to the tension. "Have you had any contact from him?" I asked. "Attempts, through his lawyer, about visitation rights for Leo." She shook her head. I refused, obviously. Julio is filing for adoption. I watched the boy engrossed in his book. He barely remembered his father now, and soon he would have a new father officially, one who would actually be present, who would love him without a hidden agenda. Maybe I should read what he has to say, I decided finally. One last time, to close this chapter for good. 2 days later, a letter arrived. The plain envelope bore the stamp of the state penitentiary and my name and address, written in Julian's familiar handwriting. I placed it on the kitchen table and stared at it for nearly an hour, unable to muster the courage to open it. Finally, with a cup of tea beside me for comfort, I opened the envelope. "Eleanor," it began, with no formal greeting. "First, I know no apology would be sufficient, so I won't insult you by offering one. What I did goes beyond marital betrayal. I manipulated and lied about fundamental aspects of your life for years. There is no forgiveness for that. I am writing because I learned through my lawyer that you are pregnant. Congratulations. I know how much you always wanted to be a mother. I also know, through the legal proceedings, that you discovered I actively sabotaged your fertility treatments. You are probably wondering why. The truth is painfully simple and selfish. I didn't want complications. A child with you would mean a permanent bond that would make my double life difficult. It was already complex managing 2 separate families. Children on both sides would have made it nearly impossible. As for Leo, he was not planned. When Isabella became pregnant, I briefly considered ending that relationship, but the opportunity to expand my business through the connection to her family was too valuable to pass up. So I adapted. I am writing not to ask for forgiveness, but so you understand that none of what happened was your fault. You didn't fail to notice signs or should have known. I am exceptionally good at lying. It's a skill I cultivated since childhood to survive an abusive home. You will probably never want to hear from me again, and I will respect that. This is my last communication, unless you indicate otherwise. Julian? I reread the letter several times, searching for... what? Genuine remorse. Some hint that the man I loved for 26 years had ever really existed? I found none of that. only the same cold, calculating nature, now disguised as brutal honesty. He didn't even ask how I was. He showed no concern for the emotional impact of his actions. Even this supposed confession was about him, his ability to lie, his strategic decisions, his selfish motives. With surprising clarity, I realized I was finally free. Not just legally divorced or physically separated, but emotionally untethered from this man I had never truly known. I took the letter and walked to the small decorative fireplace in my apartment. With a match, I turned Julian's words to ash, watching as the edges of the paper curled and blackened until nothing was left but charred fragments. "This is our closure," I said aloud to the empty apartment, one hand resting protectively on my belly. "He has no more power over us." That night, lying in bed, I felt the baby's first gentle movements, just a slight flutter, like butterfly wings. Tears rolled down my face, but for the first time in a long time, they were tears of pure joy. "It's just us now, Sophie," I whispered to my unborn daughter, the name chosen for its meaning, wisdom, and that is more than enough. 3 weeks later, I attended the small, intimate wedding of Isabella and Julio in a sun-drenched garden. Leo, proud in his little suit, carried the rings. Isabella, radiant in a simple ivory dress that accommodated her 8-month belly, finally seemed at peace. During the reception, as I watched the couple slow dancing, Clara came over with a glass of juice. "I'm still surprised to see you here," my sister commented, "at the wedding of your ex-husband's ex-mistress." I laughed softly. "Life is strange. Who knew I'd find a true friend through so much deceit? Are you okay?" Clara asked, her gaze searching my face with her ever-present concern. "I am," I replied, and I realized it was true. Not just okay, but whole. As if I had finally found my own path after years of following a map drawn by someone else. Clara smiled and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, you know. Many people would have completely lost themselves after what you went through. There were moments I almost did," I admitted. But then I remembered that his story doesn't have to define mine. That night, back in my apartment, I sat on the balcony watching the lit-up city. A year ago, I had discovered my entire life was based on an elaborate lie. I had lost my marriage, my home, my financial security, and my identity as Julian Croft's wife. But in the process of rebuilding, I had discovered something far more valuable. My own voice, my own choices, my ability to define who I wanted to be without reference to anyone else. The small business was thriving. The book continued to sell well, and in a few months, Sophie would arrive, making me a mother. The role I most desired and which Julian had tried to deny me. There were scars, of course, moments of distrust when meeting new people, occasional nightmares where I saw myself back in that corporate lobby, staring at my own face on a forbidden entry sign. Therapy would continue to be a part of my life for a long time, but the wounds were healing cleanly now, without the constant infection of doubt and active betrayal. Liberation didn't come from forgetting what Julian did, but from accepting that it happened and choosing consciously to move forward, not as a victim, but as a survivor. As the baby moved gently inside me, I smiled at the starry sky. The sign that had barred me from Julian's life turned out to be, ironically, the gateway to my true freedom. Sophie was born on an autumn morning, after 16 hours of labor. When I finally held her in my arms, tiny, pink, and indignant at the world she had just encountered, all the pain and uncertainty of the last 2 years seemed to momentarily vanish. "Hello, my love," I whispered, marveling at her tiny fingers and the fine dark hair that covered her head. "I've been waiting for you for so long." Clara, who had stayed by my side throughout the entire delivery, was crying silently in the corner of the room. "She's perfect, Eleanor. She is, isn't she? Completely perfect." The first few months with Sophie were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, daily discoveries, and an exhausting happiness I had never experienced before. Single motherhood had its undeniable challenges, but also its unique freedoms. Every decision about my daughter, from her name to the color of her crib, was entirely mine, with no need for compromise or concession. Isabella gave birth to her daughter, Luisa, just 3 weeks after Sophie. Our babies seemed synchronized from the start, reaching similar milestones almost simultaneously, much to our mutual amusement. On a sunny afternoon, when the girls were almost 6 months old, we sat in the park watching them lie on a colorful blanket, fascinated by the leaves dancing above their heads. I still sometimes wonder what Julian would think if he saw us like this, Isabella commented, adjusting Luisa's hat to shield her from the sun. He'd probably have a panic attack seeing his two carefully separated worlds mixing so completely, I replied with a wry smile. Leo asked about him last night, Isabella said softly. He saw an old photo and recognized him. What did you tell him? The truth, adapted for a 6-year-old. That his biological father did bad things and is paying for his mistakes, but that it has nothing to do with him. I told him that Julio loves him like a father and that our family is complete exactly as it is. How did he react? Surprisingly well. He asked if he could visit Julian someday when he's older. I said yes, if he still wants to when he's old enough to understand everything. I watched Leo playing on the nearby slide, his laughter echoing in the park. He was a happy, adaptable, and clearly loved child. Julian's absence in his life seemed more like a blessing than a deprivation. And you? Isabella asked. Have you thought about how you'll explain it to Sophie when she's older? The question had haunted me since I found out I was pregnant. How do you explain to a child that she was conceived through an anonymous donor because her mother had been so deeply betrayed she couldn't trust any man enough to share that journey? I'll tell her the truth too, in a way that's appropriate for her age, I replied. That she was very much wanted and planned, that I chose to bring her into the world alone because I wanted to give all my love to her, without complications, that her path to existence was different, but just as valid. Sophie giggled at that moment, as if approving of my answer, her little fists flailing with excitement at a passing butterfly. Life found its rhythm, different from anything I had ever planned, but surprisingly fulfilling. The consultancy grew steadily, allowing me to work mostly from home, organizing my schedule around Sophie's needs. The book continued to sell well, and I was occasionally invited to give talks on resilience and new beginnings, something I never imagined doing. On a spring morning, when Sophie was about to turn 1, I received a call from Mr. Davies. Good morning, Eleanor. I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all. Sophie and I are early risers. I have important news about Julian, he said, his tone indicating the matter was delicate. He's applying for early parole for good behavior and cooperation with other investigations. I felt a wave of apprehension. After only 2 years? Is that possible? Unlikely, but not impossible. Apparently, he provided valuable information on larger financial schemes he was marginally involved in. The district attorney's office is recommending a reduced sentence. What does that mean for me? Legally, nothing has changed. The restraining order remains valid, and your rights are protected. But I thought you should know, in case he's released in the coming months. I thanked him for the information and hung up, looking at Sophie, who was playing happily in her playpen. The idea of Julian free, possibly in the same city, disturbed me more than I wanted to admit. That night, after putting Sophie to bed, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, contemplating this new twist. The possibility of running into Julian casually on the street or in a restaurant made me anxious. Not out of physical fear, I didn't believe he was violent, but because of the emotional impact. I picked up my phone and called Caroline, my therapist. I think I need an extra session this week, I said when she answered. Julian might get parole soon. How do you feel about that? She asked. Direct as always. Confused. I thought I was over it, that he no longer had power over me. But the mere mention of his possible release has made me anxious. Having an emotional reaction doesn't mean you're not over it, Eleanor. It just means you're human. What's important is how you choose to deal with that reaction. In the following days, I carefully assessed my feelings about Julian's potential release. In a long session with Caroline, I explored my fears and concerns. What really scares me, I confessed, isn't so much running into him, but how I would react. What if I realize there are still traces of feelings? What if all the progress I've made is just superficial? Eleanor, having complex feelings doesn't invalidate your progress, Caroline replied. You spent 26 years loving a man who, despite everything, occupied a significant space in your life. Emotional healing is rarely linear or complete, but I don't want him to have any power over me, not even the power to make me anxious. Caroline smiled gently. Unfortunately, we can't control our initial emotional reactions. We can only consciously choose how we respond to them. Being afraid doesn't mean weakness. It means you're being honest with yourself about your vulnerabilities. Her words comforted me, but the anxiety persisted. I decided I needed to emotionally prepare for the possibility of an encounter, rather than live in indefinite fear. 3 months later, the news came. Julian's request had been partially granted. He would be transferred to house arrest with electronic monitoring after serving another 6 months in prison. When I found out, I called Isabella. "Did you hear?" I asked when she answered. "Yes, his lawyer contacted us about Leo." Her voice was controlled but tense. "Apparently, Julian plans to request supervised visits as soon as he's on house arrest. How do you feel about that?" There was a long pause, conflicted. Legally, I can't deny him the right to see his son unless I can prove it would be harmful to Leo. On the other hand, we wouldn't trust him to cross the street, I completed, drawing a short laugh from her. Exactly. Julio is the father Leo knows and loves now. I'm worried about the confusion this might cause. Are you going to talk to Leo about it? I'll have to. We prefer to be honest with him, within what's appropriate for his age. She sighed. And you? Are you worried about Julian being back in circulation? I am, I admitted. Not that I think he'd try anything, but the simple idea of running into him makes me uncomfortable. Understandable. But remember, you are not the woman he knew. You're stronger now. Her words resonated with me as I hung up. It was true. I was no longer the naive, trusting Eleanor who blindly believed in her husband. I had rebuilt myself, brick by brick, into a woman who trusted herself above all. Sophie's first birthday arrived amidst these worries, bringing a joy that temporarily pushed the shadows away. I threw a small party in the condo's garden with Clara, Isabella, and her family, and a few close friends. Watching my daughter laugh and try to take her first wobbly steps, her face smeared with cake, was the best antidote to anxiety. For someone who was terrified of single motherhood, you're doing incredibly well, Clara commented as we watched Sophie playing with Louisa and Leo. Who would have thought? Right. Maybe I needed to do this alone, without compromises, without trying to please anyone but her. You were always stronger than you thought, my sister said, hugging me by the shoulders. Julian just overshadowed it. In that moment, looking at my small, improvised family, my daughter, my sister, friends who had become as close as relatives, I felt an unexpected wave of gratitude. Julian's betrayal had destroyed the life I thought I wanted, only to make room for the life I truly needed. 6 months passed quickly. Sophie grew every day, developing a strong and curious personality. My business expanded, I hired an assistant, and I started taking on bigger projects. Life moved on, the shadow of Julian gradually diminishing. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, it happened. I was in the supermarket with Sophie in the cart, distractedly picking out fruit, when I heard a familiar voice. Eleanor? I turned slowly, my heart speeding up. Julian was standing a few feet away, holding a shopping basket. He looked thinner with a slight graying at his temples. He wore an electronic ankle monitor poorly hidden under his pants. For a moment, I froze, all the scenarios I had mentally rehearsed instantly vanishing. Sophie, oblivious to the attention, babbled happily and threw her toy on the floor. I bent down to pick up the toy, gaining precious seconds to regain my composure. When I stood up, I was surprisingly calm. "Julian," I said simply, offering nothing more. His eyes fixed on Sophie, an unreadable expression crossing his face. "So it's true. You have a daughter?" "Yes, this is Sophie." He took a small step forward as if to get a better look, but I stopped the movement with a firm gaze. "She looks like you," he commented, a strange tone in his voice. Regret? Curiosity? I couldn't identify it. "What do you want, Julian?" I asked directly. He seemed surprised by my direct approach. Another change from the Eleanor he knew. Nothing specific, I just saw you and thought I should say hello. He paused awkwardly. "I heard about your book and your company. It seems you're doing well." "I'm doing well," I confirmed, without elaborating. A strange silence settled between us. I realized I was waiting to feel something. Rage, fear, any vestige of the love I once had for him. But looking at his now familiar and simultaneously strange face, I felt only nothing. Like looking at a stranger who vaguely reminded me of someone I knew a long time ago. "I have to go," I finally said, preparing to push the cart away. "Eleanor," he called, his voice softer. "I'm sorry. For everything." I looked at him for a long time, trying to detect any sincerity behind the words. His eyes seemed different, less confident, less calculating. Prison had changed something in him, but I no longer cared enough to find out exactly what. I was sorry, too, Julian, for a long time. But I'm not anymore. I turned the cart and continued my shopping, aware of his gaze on my back, but feeling strangely light. The encounter I had so feared had happened, and nothing broke. The world didn't fall apart. I didn't fall apart. In the car, after settling Sophie in her car seat, I allowed myself a moment to process what had happened. It wasn't the words exchanged that mattered, not even seeing him again. What really mattered was realizing he had become irrelevant to my life. That night, after putting Sophie to bed, I sat down to write the epilogue for my book, which was being prepared for a second edition. The words flowed easily. Today, I ran into the man I once believed was the love of my life, the man whose lies nearly destroyed me. I had waited for this moment with anxiety, fearing it might shake the new foundations I had so carefully built, but when it finally happened, I discovered a surprising truth. He no longer had any power over me, not because I had completely overcome the pain or because I had reached some perfect state of emotional healing, but because I had rebuilt myself so completely that he simply no longer fit into any space in my life. When my name was barred from the reception of his company on that fateful day 2 years ago, I lost everything I thought defined my life. My marriage, my identity as a wife, my financial security, my trust in my own judgment. But in that devastating loss, I found something far more valuable: the freedom to rediscover who I am when I'm not living in the shadows of someone else's lies, the courage to build a life entirely my own, on my own terms. Today, looking at my daughter sleeping peacefully, at my modest but truly mine home, at the work I built with my own hands, I realized that the betrayal that should have destroyed me ended up being the portal to my true life. I am not grateful for what he did. Calculating cruelty deserves only contempt, but I am profoundly grateful for what I found afterward: the strength I didn't know I had, the resilience I never needed to test, and the ability to build happiness on my own terms. The sign that forbade me from entering the fake life he built turned out to be the door that led me to the authentic life I deserved. And for that, ironically, I found a freedom I would never have known if his lies had remained intact. 5 years have passed since then. Sophie is now a vivid and curious 6-year-old, starting to ask questions about why she doesn't have a dad like some of her friends. I answer with simple truths, appropriate for her age, promising myself that I will never build our life on lies, no matter how comfortable they may seem. My company has grown beyond my initial expectations, and recently, I bought a larger apartment with a small garden where Sophie can play. I've been dating for almost a year now, a history professor I met at a literary fair where I presented my second book. Paul is kind, patient, and honest, qualities I now value far more than charm or ambition. Isabella and Julio now have 3 children, including a recently adopted boy. Leo, now 11, occasionally visits Julian under supervision, but the visits are becoming rarer as his interests turn to music, sports, and friends. The life Isabella built with Julio turned out to be more real and fulfilling than any fantasy Julian ever sold. As for Julian, I hear occasional news. He completed his house arrest sentence and now works as a consultant for a small firm, a significant fall from the empire he once commanded. I heard he recently remarried. I hope, for her sake, he has learned some lesson about honesty. But that news is just a passing curiosity in a life that remains completely independent of his. The woman who once defined her entire identity as Julian's wife now barely thinks of him, except when Sophie asks specific questions. Last week, while sorting through some old documents, I found the wedding ring I had put away so long ago. I looked at the gold circle that once represented so much, promises, dreams, a whole life shared, and felt only a distant nostalgia, like someone looking at a faded photograph of a place they visited a long time ago. I placed it in a small box along with other memories of the past, not to display, not to hide, just to keep as a concluded chapter of a much longer and richer story than I ever imagined it would be possible to write. Some scars remain, of course. I still have moments of doubt when trusting new relationships. I still double-check everything. I still ask hard questions. I still keep my eyes open where I once preferred to keep them comfortably closed. But these are not weaknesses. They are hard-won wisdom. When Sophie recently asked me what I wanted to be when I was little, I smiled, realizing that I had finally become exactly who I was meant to be. Not the supporting character in someone else's story, but the protagonist of my own journey. Not defined by betrayals suffered, but by the strength found to overcome them. The sign I saw that day, with my face and the words, "Entry forbidden," should have been the end of my story. Instead, it was just the beginning. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click subscribe, and tell me in the comments which part left your jaw on the floor. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos I don't post here. I'll see you there.